This story takes place back in 2009. Before we get into the two sets of three of two sets, have to give a little bit of preface here. I was on tour for a few bands. Fish was the big money maker of that summer, and there've been some good festivals. There's been a lot of ups and downs because when you're driving a vehicle, used vehicles, thousands of miles over, you don't know what sort of terrain you might get into during the course of things because it's kind of an open-ended uh, traveling thing because sometimes you don't have the whole summer planned out and there's days in between and then festivals along the way during the tour. So it's just some of us sort of make it up as you go along. You make plans, but they change sometimes. Campgrounds, you know where the cities are, but the campgrounds in the mountains can be across unusual terrain. So that's hard on a vehicle, and it so happened that things had sort of picked up towards the end of the tour as far as taking in revenue, but I was in a vehicle that was fading all summer long. The transmission was going out. So it was inevitable. It was going to happen. It was a matter of trying to save up enough money to buy something decent when it did go out. Well, and I struggled with it for, all the way back from Denver, Colorado to the East Coast a little bit and out to Chicago and then back to New York, near Albany, New York, all with a slipping transmission. Some gears it wouldn't go into at all, and ultimately it lost reverse. See, your parking was tricky, but the festival it died at, no kidding, was called End of the Road Festival. And the unusual license plate I painted for the front end of it was a Grateful Dead skull, the one typically seen on the Still Your Face symbol, but it had, instead of a circle around it, it had like a skull and crossbones, it had crossbones across it. Well, the guy who owned the festival ground at End of the Road was really his farm. The stage was in his barn, and he had a tattoo. He had that as a tattoo. I'm not even kidding you. And he wanted the van, so he got the van from me. And actually, because it was in the shape it was in, we just made a deal that he'd help me find another vehicle. And so me and my buddy Ron lingered around this farm after everybody else was going, getting to know this old dude. He was ex-military guy. Like 70 years old or something, still in good shape, and he had family and the whole 9 yards, an interesting person. So he had a lot of friends in that local area. Well, most of the people that were working staff at the festival, suddenly after the festival's cleared out, you find out they're just friends that lived around him, neighbors and whatnot. Also deadheads from a multitude of things. When someone is a deadhead doesn't mean that's all they are. The deadhead Marine like this guy was, or whatever. Actually, I'm not sure what branch of service he'd been in. I forget. But everybody's got other aspects to their life. So anyhow, to get back to that situation, so I had to get another vehicle. Well, we hunt around, and he talks to people, and he finds one worth going to check out. And the guy selling it's in his 20s. And it's beautiful. It's a big, long, black, full-size, well, super full-size, extended length van, set up a little higher than normal, like Super Duty. I believe it was a Chevy. I honestly don't remember what model it was. I remember how beautiful it was. Shiny black, and the inside of it, everything was customized. Like instead of door handles, it had like big pirate ropes and a big like a table on the back of it that had a skull that you took the top off and you put stuff in. It was all customized out like perfect for the beggar's tomb already by this young dude who it was like his pimped out vehicle, but he needed a car at this point in his life. He figured, so he was getting rid of this van, and it was a good deal, and I bought it. But there's one problem with it. When I tried it out, didn't notice it, but when he had to do some things before he came and dropped it off back at that farm. And when he dropped it off there, when we got to driving, the heater was running and the switches were broke off of the heater. So you couldn't turn the heater off. And it was summer, it was August. So you had to put the windows down. Well, that was kind of an inconvenience at first. But the first show I'm taking it to is right there. Let's see, what's that? SPAC. At the SPAC Center. So it wasn't long drive for the first couple shows, but so didn't really notice it too bad. And then at those shows, I ended up getting these riders that were a couple that just got out of the military in their early 20s. So they were like really excited. It was a real happy time of their life, and because it's time of adventure that they're out experiencing the freedom that they went and fought for. Because they actually have been in Iraq. They were in Iraq. Because this was 2011. They got back from Iraq, and one guy had been a medic, so his nickname was Doc, and I forget the girl's name, sadly to say now, but they were a perfect couple for me to have with me because they ended up being workers for me for 2 shows and traveling. They still had the military discipline that, they weren't going to complain about long rides or anything like that. And, they're handling, to them, there was no stress to handle. They didn't consider it a stress. They were just really happy, enthusiastic, and good people to work, good workers, and, like I said, perfect. So, and my friend Ron, he sold pipes. So hand blown glass is what he sold. And he walked around and sold that. So didn't take up much space in my van, and he paid half the gas. So it was very affordable, and not only affordable, now I had 2 workers that I think I was paying them, but between the 2 of them, like $100 a day is nothing, but they were just happy to be getting to travel. To them, they were getting to travel for free. And if they wanted to leave, if they wanted to go into a show, there's deals we could make and all that they could still have the fun that they wanted to have without working too hard. But then had a show up in some New England shows. Then come back down into New York, and then there was a show out. Well, it was Jones Beach, but the place I knew to sleep on Long Island, where you could park and sleep, was farther out on Long Island. So, and it's called Long Island for a reason. It's a really long island. First, people think about Long Island as being like a neighborhood in New York if you're not from there, because you hear it talked about like it. But it's really I think it's like 100 miles long, over 100 miles long. It's a long island. So we were headed all the way out across that. Well, at the show before that, Ron had taken it upon himself to remove the doghouse of the van and get in there and turn that heater off, because it was driving him crazy. He got that heater turned off, so we didn't have to worry about the heater for that long drive. But as I got farther out, and I was already past where I would have been if I was just going to Jones Beach, but I'm going out to the sleeping areas, about to it, just really about to it, and all of a sudden I could smell freaking antifreeze. And then this vehicle starts missing, and I'm like, daggone it, a blown head gasket. I'd experienced that before, and I started putting 2 and 2 and 2 together, and I realized exactly what had happened. That dude that sold me that van knew it was overheating to a degree, knew there was a problem with the cooling system. So what he had done was turn the heater on full blast and break the switches off. Because with the heater blowing out the hot air, it wasn't going to get to that temperature level. It was going to cause whatever issue he knew it had. So now that Ron had fixed it, so he didn't have to deal with the heat, now I had a broke down van. Because I didn't want to mess with it. I was going to fix it when I got off tour. We were coming to the end of this tour anyhow. I think there was 2 nights at Long Island, 2 nights at Jones Beach, and then 1 more night up in Hartford, I think. And then that was it. That tour was going to be over anyhow, and I was going back to Davis, West Virginia, where at the time I was sharing rent with my buddy Bob Burkhammer. I had a place to go back to, and there I could fix it, and, have time to fix it and worry about that. Meantime, I just worry about my food. But like I say, Ron took one. Now I got a broke down vehicle on Long Island, and the young couple, they turned to me that morning and they're like, so now what are we gonna do? And I'm like, I don't. I hate to tell you this, but it's a matter of what you're going to do now because I don't have a ride for you to go in, and if I don't have a ride, I really don't have a business. So they've they're like, so that's it? Because they couldn't believe I couldn't believe how well of an upswing I was on, and then it was gone just like that. Like it was just they were shocked. It wasn't the first time I've been shocked like that. So I was just like, but there's times I've been like, could look at errors I was making, and been like, yeah, I guess I deserved that bad break. But this was a time where everything seemed to be in an upswing, so it's kind of one of them things like, well, it's meant to be for some reason, so I'll just figure out what's going to go on next. So I called a buddy of mine, Tom, and he told him my situation, asked if he knew anybody out I might be able to catch a ride with that far out on Long Island, and he made some phone calls and he knew this girl, and but I needed to get to the show, and I could catch a ride with her. She couldn't go out to get me there. We ended up trading the van to these two guys, to all had a pickup truck, gave them the van, still had the title and everything. So signed title and everything. They got it for free, just to give me a ride, me and my supplies a ride to the show over at Jones Beach. So they got a van out of that. We put a broke down van. And I got my stuff there, and I was able to vend that show, and then I had a ride. And actually, so I went to the next show. Anyhow, this is all still the prelude, so I'm going to skip back to that. This girl ends up giving me a ride all the way back to Davis after the tour's over with my vending supplies and everything. So I didn't lose my vending supplies, just lost the van. Tour's over. Now it's coming in September, and I don't have a vehicle to do any more touring, and that was my job. So, it was my way of earning money, so now I'm basically unemployed and without a vehicle. But I was like, what am I going to do now? Well, the biggest thing that was going on in the Grateful Dead musical scene at the time was exciting, was just about to start. When I had a band, I was figuring I was going to have to miss it because it's all the way out in Oakland, California. They were getting together a new band called Further. Now, there had been Further Festival already, and Further, you may or may not know, the name of that goes back to the Merry Pranksters bus. So just linking all the way back to the early 60s and the acid test, bringing the whole history of things into the present, but with a new name, so better than old, better than new. And it was all the way out in Oakland. There was only 3 shows, so I wasn't going to drive that big van out there. I could for 3 shows at a I think Fillmore Auditorium or something. It's at Fox Theater. It just wasn't going to be a huge show where I was going to make a crap. There was just no way financially it was justifiable. But now I needed to do something. So, and I couldn't do it with food because I didn't have vehicle trip. So I did that back to the very most fundamental way of trying to exist was do a poster for that show and hitchhike out to Oakland. But before that, my youngest son he had sort of regressed in his potty training after me and his mom had split up. And we hadn't been split up real long. And, I was telling her, I was like, what he would do the whole time he'd be with me on weekends is he wouldn't take a crap. And as soon as he'd get in the vehicle with her, he'd crap himself. And I was telling her, I was like, you got to let him have more time with me to stretch. And I said, I got this show coming. I got to leave on, I got to be out. I think it was, the shows out in Oakland were, I want to say September 11th. Or no, it might have been 18th, 17th, 18th, 19th. Anyway, I was leaving myself 10 days to get there. So if I knew what day the shows were, I know exactly what day I left. His birthday was on the 2nd. So anyhow, I said, you can give me a whole stretch with him, from one weekend, the beginning of one weekend to the end of the next weekend, then I can do this potty training thing. She's like, you saying you can accomplish in a week what I haven't been able to do in these last 2 years? And I'm like, yes. And, it was nothing to her because it was a matter of kindness that she was failing because she was a little too nice. And when he'd say he couldn't, and this and that, she didn't want to push the issue. But that's not a fault. I think, I've talked to other single fathers, and they'd also been the ones to be able to successfully potty train. And I think it's sort of a natural thing that, and not to apply gender stereotypes, but at least in our case, she was more loving and caring and nurturing and sweet, and I was the one to be like, hey, you got to do this, how you got to do that. And I think that's typical, but that's not what that's just the way we were achieving success as a team. But now we had to figure out how we were going to achieve success apart because I had lost that positive aspect when they were with me, her attributes when they were with me, and she didn't have my attributes when they were with her. So, we're figuring this out. So anyhow, I got to spend time with all three of the kids during that time, which was good. But it was also, I was working on that poster right up until the end, and I had to worry of like, boy, is this, I hadn't hitchhiked out to California since in my early 20s, but a couple years earlier, I'd had an argument not an argument, but Kate's best friend. If you knew her, she's the best loyal friend you could ever have. When she's friends, if she's arguing with you, she's the worst person you'd ever want to argue with. She's good at that too. So, and she's very, well, I don't want to say anything bad about her, but so, I said something about, she's like, well, how would you do this or that if you didn't, it's like, well, if I had to, I could hitchhike. It was said. She's like, you could, you wouldn't, you couldn't. And I said, Jenny, I've hitchhiked all the way across country before a few times. And she's like, what, when you were in your early 20s? And this is when I was in my mid 30s at this point. And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, but you couldn't do that now. And I'm like, yes, I could. But now I had to prove it, not to her, but to myself, and her, and in the back of my mind, her too. And so, 2009. I was 36, going to be 37 that December. So, mid-30s still. So he was successfully potty trained at the end of the week, but I got to catch a ride. We got to leave town on foot and catching them rides. Now, the closest town after you get to see Thomas and Davis in West Virginia, right close together. After you get to the other side of Thomas, I was still walking, but the next big town is Oakland, and I catch a ride. Well, it's with my buddy Bob Burkhammer's ex-wife, and she's got their son in the car with them, and she's like, hey, where you need a ride to? And I'm like, well, I'm actually going to Oakland, and she said, oh, good, me too. And I'm like, well, actually, I'm going to Oakland, California, but Oakland, Maryland is in the right direction for me to catch the road to. So she gave me a ride to Oakland, Maryland, and then I started catching rides out. Now, it took me a while to get to, now the prelude is over, and we're getting to the 2 sets of 3, 3 of 2 sets. Now, there's a number of rides I caught to get to Dayton, Ohio. But 2 days later, spent one night sleeping Frostburg. I was accident, Maryland, where I-68 comes across there. I slept the night there, and then I think one more night just outside of Dayton. And then on the next morning, I was at a truck stop, and I catch a ride. Now, this 2 sets of 3. The first set is 3 lengthy rides I caught with people. They were all 3 on this trip to California. I covered, a couple thousand miles. The bulk of those miles came in 3 rides. And then there were a lot of little rides. Well, this was the first of the long rides. And now, me being still in the early days of divorce, was, uncertain of my future and wondering what was the right thing to do. And, should I try and get find another woman? You know, like go back and push a dating life, or should I give up on just what should I do now? You know, it's like I didn't ever plan on this happening, didn't ever plan on being in this position, and was kind of at a loss for direction to a degree. Well, this guy, Bill Bryan, and it's, all three of these men in these long rides were divorcees who had older than me, who'd lived through the experience, and so they were examples of possibilities of options for me to go forward. Now, Bill Bryan, I would come to find out, was the professor who founded the first all organic agriculture collegiate program in the United States. He was an Irish immigrant, and you know, so doctorate degree, I think, you know, whole full 9 yards of education and success in life, but he was a divorcee. And during the, let's see, we're with all the way from Dayton to Denver. His brother had rolled a tractor out near Denver, and you know, like an 80-year-old man, so he was seriously injured in this tractor rolling accident. So he's going out there to see his brother in the hospital, and he had some situation with his eyes where he couldn't drive after dark. So it was extra length in the drive because he had stopped to get a hotel, which, you know, there's no problem for me sleeping on the floor, and because I was going to be sleeping under a bridge otherwise, so I didn't mind. I had 10 days to get there, and being able to wake up in the next morning already in a ride and going forward was still good. Not to mention that he bought me breakfast, like a full breakfast buffet, so I got a nice meal out of all this too. Not only right, you know, so I'm not paying him money, and I'm getting an example of, well, I've been getting education because we go past. He listened to on the radio. I didn't even know it was like agricultural radio, but on AM, and he listened to agricultural radio. At least there is out there in the Midwest, because you got to keep in mind we're going across Iowa and farm country and stuff. And he's telling me all about agriculture and the problems that we face to feeding the population, and the benefits and the negative downfalls of trying to use a lot of chemicals to combat that, and his theory of just a lot of stuff, a lot of science, interesting conversation, and that. But as far as the example of what for me going forward, well, he had been now at this point divorced for 14 years and was still honored, and I mean still honoring his marriage, like to him. I mean, his marriage was a marriage. There was no other option. That he would never ever date again until he died, or she came back to him. Either way, his life was, his commitment was the one commitment, and that was it. Well, that was like, you know, so the highest example in a way, you know, as far as, because hey, if you say make that commitment, then and you don't honor it, well then what's good your word, you know. Now in my situation, it was I already was like, you know, to a degree I hadn't honored it, you know, so that was already an example that was too high for me. But just because an example, you've already been falling short of an example in the past, doesn't mean you can't follow it going forward. You know, so I was seeing that as an example, but there's also a sad, you know, to me there's a certain amount of sadness in it, because she was remarried. His wife was remarried, you know, and I'm like thinking, why doesn't he, you know, why, I just was like, why should he punish himself like that too, you know, but it was a choice that he made, and that was the first ride with Bill Bryan, and he epic ride in a little car. His car had been, when I walked up on it, it looked like a golf ball because it had been in a hailstorm, beat up a golf ball. So that ride was over just south of Denver. Now during the next couple of days, there was a lot of little rides going up from below Denver up to Fort Collins, and then catching on I-80, heading further west. And then when I get to Wyoming, I get the second of the set of three, of this first set of three. And it's now when I caught this ride, I was at a what do you call those rest areas where you pull in, maybe just got a bathroom facilities area and a lot of truckers sleep there and stuff like that. Well, I'm out where you're coming out of that to get back on the highway with my thumb out. That truck goes by me. He goes pretty good ways by me, and then he pulls off. I knew he wasn't pulling off for me, but I didn't know what he was pulling off for. But I decided to pretend like I thought he was pulling off for me because, you know, call it swindle or not, I had a little plan here. So I ran up, just chucking. It was a long ways. Like I say, he went far enough past me. I knew he wasn't stopping for me. So it was probably 100 yards or so. And I must have got to get up to him. Like, oh, thank God you stopped. He was out. And he's like, well, I was just checking the air on my tire. And I'm like, oh, no, oh, crap. I thought you just pulled over to give me a ride. And he's like, well, you know. So I got the ride. And this guy, he had once driven a tour bus for some pretty big bands. I can't remember what bands they were, but they were rather big. And so he was familiar with tour lifestyle, but he's always been a professional driver. But he had also a fan of the Grateful Dead. Now his example of his marriage was he wasn't a happy one for him. And then he met this woman who was a trucker, and they were just friends for the longest time. And they became a trucker team, and they started becoming attracted to each other. And he decided he thought maybe he should get with her since his marriage wasn't working out anyhow. And, you know, he ended up even telling his wife that, you know, he didn't want to cheat on her to do it, but he was thinking that might be what the best thing for him to do would be. And she said, no, you know, you don't get my permission. So he decided ultimately he's going to leave his wife and get with this other woman. Well, after he did, you know, he said his wife did lots of little things to cause all the problems in the world she could, and was causing trouble with that other woman. And then telling him she'd stop causing all problems if he just come back home and get back in his marriage. So he lost the woman, and he went back to his marriage, and then it failed again, of course, because it wasn't working the first time. So he went back, maybe, because, I mean, according to him, she didn't seem to care about him when they were together, but she cared about him, cared to be together with him when couldn't be. So it's bad. Like, his situation was worse than the other guys who just decided that he was never going to date again. And because now he found the one he thought might have been his true love, but he lost her because he was trying to. His pickle was a pickle, you know. Is that he was trying to make the right decision, but he already made decisions that were like, I don't know. Anyhow, it didn't work out for him. That ride got me all the way to Salt Lake City, Utah, and then Salt Lake. I don't know exactly where I caught the next ride, but the third example. Now, his wife left him, cheated on him with another guy. He plotted against her. He knew a guy who worked with the guy she got with. And that guy started giving this dude free drugs. It was to be paid for by his ex-wife's husband. His plot was to get her new man hooked on drugs. He was buying them himself out of his pocket and telling this guy who worked with him, give them to him, give them to him, give them to him. And they did. And he got this guy hooked on drugs. In the process, she got hooked on drugs. And then he had a son get evidence of it. They prosecuted to the police and busted that marriage up. Ended up sort of busting her life up. Let her come back to live with him, sleep on the couch, go sleep in a vehicle when he had a date, and babysit the kids anytime he wanted to, and was still manipulating her life where if she went somewhere, his son would call him like that. That was the situation he was in. So he did the most reprehensible behavior in response to his situation, and he got the best results. That wasn't even an option for me. Now, all these people, all three of these rides, were good people. I mean, I mean, I guess anytime you say that, it depends on who you're talking to. Talking to the dude, if you could, he gave me a ride. All these people gave me long rides and helped me cover my distance. So, as far as I'm concerned, you know, now other people might have different reports of these people, but those were the three examples I got. That was the three. That was the first set of three. Now here comes the second set of three. Still had a little more miles to cover, and got to anyhow. I know all during these rides, even the little rides, there weren't many female drivers pick up hitchhikers, or maybe there are, but for me there weren't on that trip. And I was thinking, I understood that, because everybody sort of considers a hitchhiker a danger, a potential danger, and a female typically more so considers them that. Maybe, I don't know, but then when I got to California, it sort of flip-flopped. All of a sudden, the rides were typically females, and catch this ride was one lady. She ends up, I hate to say it, but she was like methed out or something. She got me out to this area far off my beaten path, and I was telling her I thought it was. She's like, no, I'll go get you back to where you need to go. I'm going to get you back to where you go. And then, I got to wait here in the vehicle. I got to go talk to somebody, and then I'm hours waiting. And then ultimately she comes back, hey, I hate to tell you this, but you're just going to have to get out here. So anyhow, I'm like near Pittsburgh, California, but kind of don't even know exactly where I'm at. I don't have a map or nothing. I had a flip phone then, but it didn't pull up the internet or nothing like that. So I'm walking across this area, Pittsburgh. Now, these set of three are three, I hope I'm using this word right, hypocrisies. They were things that just seemed totally self-contradictory. The first big hypocrisy I saw was a giant Goodwill distribution center, and it's a great big sign above it, huge distribution center, far bigger than like a Goodwill store. We're talking about a big place where trucks pull in and load full of stuff, and big distribution center. And up above it, a great big sign says Goodwill. Those are the words you see, Goodwill, all the way around it. Twining razor wire, not barbed wire, razor wire, like all around and fenced in like it's a prison. It says Goodwill. And I just thought if I had a camera, that would be a really good picture. I don't know if I had a flip phone. I don't know if it had a camera or not. Apparently it didn't, because I didn't take a picture. So, and I know I would have if it had. So I could say if I'd had a camera, it would have been a great picture. That was the first one of those hypocrisies. Now, the second one I saw, not very far from here, all in this walk, because this is a walk. It might have been 10 miles over the course of the day I covered. It was a long walk, and I got big bags, so I'm carrying heavy shit. But the next big hypocrisy I saw was at a DuPont chemical factory. But around it, it said Wildlife Refuge. So it's a DuPont Chemical Wildlife Refuge. You see what I mean? And then it had like a sign telling what. And you're seeing these big chemical things in the center of it, but around I'm looking at a sign that says Wildlife Refuge. So that would have been a great picture. Wildlife Refuge with the big chemical things. And so that was the second great hypocrisy. Now, during the course of carrying this, carrying all my bags and walking, I come across this shopping cart. It's all very flipped upside. It's in these bushes. And I'm like, maybe I could. So I put my stuff in there. Surprise, the wheels work good. And I pushed my bags in the shopping cart. And it's then by midday and everything, when the sun gets all hot and stuff, I was hot. And ultimately came to an area where I see over near the highway, because I finally make it back to the interstate, where the interstate's going to be. But there's some shade there. and there's a big piece of steel that's covering a culvert, but big, like maybe 10 foot by 10 foot, and it's in shade. And I'm thinking to myself, seeing that steel in shade, I'm like, oh, I bet that's cool. I bet that steel feels cool. I'd like to lay down on that, but get some Z's, because I think it's nice. So that's what I decided to do. Push that shopping cart over there, laid out on that big piece of steel in that shade, and it was nice and cool. And I fell asleep, and I wake up, this big, like, burly hippie guy in tie-dye and long hair and beard, looks like he's going to a Grateful Dead concert or something, but he's taking a shopping cart. And I'm like, hey, man. He's like, oh, no, I'm taking this. And I see what he's got. He's got a truck. On the back of the trailer, and it's full of shopping carts. And he's a shopping cart reclaimer. That was his job. He goes around quick. And I'm like, oh man, that sucks. And he's like, yeah, sorry, dude. Gotta make a living. I said, hey, where are you headed to? And he's like, oh, I'm going this way. I'm going to San Francisco. And I'm going to Oakland. That's where. Could you give me a ride? No, couldn't give me a ride. So that was the third hypocrisy, was a tie-dye hippie dude steal my shopping cart and won't give me a ride hitchhiking. So that's the 2 sets of 3. First set, a set of 3 examples to continue on as a divorcee. Second set of 3 was hypocrisies in Pittsburgh, California, and 2 wards, Oakland, California, where I ultimately got, where it was 3 nights of 2 sets. So 2 sets of 3, 3 of 2 sets. That's what that story is about. And on the 3rd night of those shows, the band guested me in for the shows, and I didn't have tickets for any of them, but they saw my poster I did. Not like band members, but band crew. And so backstage, to come out to the parking lot and, get the ticket, given the tickets in front of people where it look cool, and then get to walk in the backstage pass area. So I got treated well by the band, by the scene, and the trip was successful. I was just as good hitchhiking at 30s, in my mid-30s, as I was in my 20s. I was actually smarter, because I didn't hitchhike late at night. If it got to a certain point of the night, I'd find a place to sleep, because I decided that, the rides you catch are just sketchier at that point, and there's sense in taking unnecessary risks. I never take rides with people that appear inhibited whatsoever, and I usually try and get enough words in the introduction to tell if their speech is slurred or how they're acting, and, turn down rides, because, hey, obviously. So that's the conclusion of that story.